Welcome to Modern Morality. My name is Mikey, and I'm joined here by John.
Hello, everyone.
And Johnny.
Hello.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoy. Alrighty, welcome back to Modern Morality. Sorry that we missed last week. Just some things came up, and we're here now. So I hope you enjoy. So today we're going to talk about music, how music shapes morality. Some examples of good lessons you can learn from morality or from music, or bad lessons you can learn from music. And when did maybe that change? So
influence. Musical influence.
Yeah, influence of music on people. Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. So,
I'd kind of like to start off the conversation with, since I'm, once again, the most experienced person in the room.
And don't let us forget that.
I will not, because it's never forgotten by everybody else. Going back to my first experience with music, hearing it on the radio, and then later on phonographs. Yes, we had electricity back then.
8 tracks.
8 tracks, cassettes. I've been through the gambit. I've had a little bit of all of it. In fact, I've got some 8-track tapes that I will not play because they will probably disintegrate.
Probably.
You could actually find 8-track players. Anyway, getting back to the topic. Looking at how music has changed from when I first was introduced to it up until today, it has, in my opinion, become more perverse because I think that early on, especially with broadcast music, which was my first introduction, the FCC has specific regulations on what could be transmitted over the air and what could not. So a lot of the music that will hear out of the 60s was not...
it was more censored, is kind of what you're talking about. Not necessarily censored, but it was filtered before it went out.
Regulated.
It was regulated, and artists who recorded these songs and music, they knew what the regulations were. And granted, it's just like today, everybody pushes the limit as far as they can. But for the most part, what you heard over the airwaves was watered down versions of probably what the artist actually wanted to portray. That being said, I know that there was a lot of innuendo and synonyms and hyperbole and a lot of things that were used back then to get around censorship. I was never into poetry, but a lot of poetry had symbolism in it, and so did song lyrics. And I've noticed that as regulations have been relaxed, things that are broadcast are still somewhat not necessarily censored, but the people who try to broadcast it know what they can get by with and what they can't. Right. But when it comes to other media, such as streaming, as CDs, as digital media is concerned, there is no limit on what can be put on.
So are you saying that the artists themselves have not really changed morals over the years, but the censors have?
I wouldn't say that specifically, but I know that we've discussed this before. Morality has changed, and morality in music, which is what this discussion is about, is very obvious. I mean, there's things that are being sung that.
Well, didn't artists used to sing that way all the time though? It's just they didn't get to publish their
Oh, I
songs
would
that
almost
way?
say let's go back as far as we can think of. And John, you may have lived through these times, but if you think about before the Great Depression,
Mikey, you're within arm's reach of me.
so but if you think about it, there seems to be like a wave of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say culturally appropriate, but there is a line being pushed. So there was a time where music was very modest, is the word I would use for it, and then certain genres of music came into play, and things became rowdier, as the best way I can describe it.
I think it's more shock value than anything. But
Right.
Yes.
But I mean, you have like the introduction of certain I guess when was jazz introduced?
Oh, jazz was from before the Great Depression, but I don't know that firsthand. John?
Right. So if we're looking at jazz, a lot of people, and then again, I'm no expert on it, but from what I remember in my studies in school, jazz came along almost as an escape from the, I don't want to say Bible thumping culture that they lived in back in the day. It's kind of a way to go and just let loose, have fun.
Well, jazz itself was a musical genre. It wasn't necessarily a
Subculture.
It wasn't even a vocalization. It was more the type of music that it was, and from that you got dancing.
Yeah.
And some of the dancing that came out of jazz was considered morally decrepit. But once again, that's one person's opinion.
Well, I know.
So what a lot of people don't realize, I don't know how far you'd have to go back to get this, but most of your church hymns were bar songs.
Yeah.
So, we haven't really got to that in this discussion, but, intent. What's the intent of the artist? Sometimes it's used to either, advertise their morals or influence other people either positively or negatively.
See, and the intent of every artist is so difficult because a lot of artists nowadays, like I would say back in the day, like I lived through it, there were times where, artists had a style. They had this type of song. It might push some boundaries, and they would continue pushing boundaries, but it was almost expected of them. I feel like a lot of times nowadays, people change genres or change their styles so rapidly to fit the culture rather than to fit their own morals. And I feel like that's the big difference between music today versus music 20, 30 years ago. And you're talking about intent. I feel like back in the day, it was a lot easier to determine intent. But I feel like modern artists, it's hard to determine besides seeking attention, which, they're artists, kind of what they're meant to do.
When we talk about shock factor, and I grew up in a great time when we start talking about shock factor, because I had people like Marilyn Manson and let's see who else,
Kiss.
Well, you had all the heavy metal, but I say heavy metal, the hard, what is deemed classic rock now, but Rat was a really big, drug, sex, and rock and roll, whatever the moniker is. And
Yeah, he's not going back as far as you are, John.
No, he's not going back nearly as far as I am.
Marilyn Manson? When was Marilyn Manson prominent?
Probably the 80s.
And that's before Rat? Help me out here.
Rap, there's multiple versions of rap.
No, not rap. Rat. The band. Rat. Yeah. Not rap music.
Ladies and gentlemen, I interrupt this program because we have a lack of communication here. I don't know what a rat is.
No.
I'm assuming it's with two T's.
So when I was in high school, our social studies teacher, history teacher, made us watch a documentary on the band Rat, and the whole documentary was about drugs and their drug addictions, sex, and rock and roll. That was the whole documentary. So
Well, that now that you've opened up that can of worms, that goes back to my generation. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Berry?
Say again?
Chuck Berry?
Chuck Berry didn't do rap. so it made me lose my train of thought, which is not hard to do. Yeah, in my generation, going from the mid '60s to the mid '70s, that was the highlight as far as I'm concerned of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That was it.
That was my nursery rhyme era.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which you can also see that in the culture. So if you look at like the 50s, again, everybody was very modest for the most part. And then you have the 60s and 70s, and clothes became more revealing, and activities tended to be...
Well, you can go back and say people had that perception in the 20s.
Right.
As far as revealing clothes and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Dance.
And that's what I was trying to get...
Method of dance and all that
And that's what I was trying to get to with the introduction of like jazz music, which is kind of that... I don't want to say it's degrading the culture, because I think jazz added a good bit to the culture. But at that time, it was almost deemed morally unsound. So it was almost like a rebellious form of music that helped shape that.
Unsound. Was that a play on words? That's pretty good.
That good thing, make me lose my train of thought. But anyways, it's almost like there are certain music, I don't want to say genres, just certain musical events that kind of shaped a culture. And I think the 60s and 70s is a great example of that. You have, was it Woodstock? And if you look at some of the pictures from Woodstock, it was insane.
What's a little yellow bird got to do with anything? Oh, different Woodstock. Excuse me.
Yeah. You know,
again, I'm not as old as some people, so.
But I mean, you look at the pictures. I mean, there's a lot of women and men who were almost like absolutely naked. They were carrying around drugs like nothing was wrong with it, and they were listening to, I don't want to say listening to bands that encouraged it, but a lot of their music did encourage it in a way.
I'd like to add right now while I'm thinking about it, if everybody will not interrupt me so that I can keep a train of thought. Artists.
Don't you just hate it when people interrupt?
Artists.
I know, right?
Artists, when they publish a song, they publish alternate lyrics, and they will do a live performance of certain lyrics that they won't publish, because it gives them a wider range of audience if they don't put people off.
Yeah, and I have a good example of this. So
isn't that the reason most people prefer, at least 70s, all joking aside,
live
to go to live performances and versus?
And it gives people a chance to see something different. The paying audience that goes to see a live performance, they're investing in this performance, and they want to see something other than what they're getting from digital media.
So one of the examples,
which, by the way, is where MTV came in.
So, John, I don't know if you know this song. I'm sure you've heard it in several commercials and stuff like that. Johnny, I know you've heard it.
Is it by Rat?
No.
Then I don't know it.
So it's a song that's famously known as "Forget You" by CeeLo Green. And anyways, so to your point, I believe there's two versions of a song. You have the original version, which is the more I don't want to say genuine version, but yeah, it's the more genuine version. And then you have what I call the Kids Bop version, which is the cleaned up, take the vulgarity out of it. "Forget You" was not originally "Forget You"; it was "F You." And
I think probably Johnny and I realized that right off the bat.
Thanks for spelling that out.
But you had an entire community listen to one part of it, and then a younger community who was allowed to listen to the music that was been censored and all that. They had the same song, just one word changed.
One example of
all right, so let me
expanding their audience.
Let me ask, where's all this going? Is it chicken and egg discussion, or is the way we've changed how we?
I mean, we already introduced Woodstock, so
the way music has been able to be censored or published, has that changed morals, or has the morals changed
Well,
that?
I may even have something to even add to that. Is the music changing the culture, or is the culture,
The culture is allowing the music to change.
right? And
Well, yes, I agree with that. My question
Which brings
is,
us back to the chicken and the egg.
has the morality actually changed, and was music the cause or driver of that? Did it have that influence?
It had an influence.
I think it definitely had a great influence, because I mean, music was created to be heard. And
So I think we're all over the board here. I'm thinking the morals haven't changed, just the acceptance of some activity. John's saying it influenced it to some degree. Mikey's saying it had every impact in the world.
I don't
so-
want to say it's every impact in the world. I mean, there's definitely other factors that impact morality, but I think music is a good indicator of where the moral or the culture is as far as morality. Because if you listen to today's music compared to music back in the 60s, I mean, there is a pretty big difference, depending on the band, of course. Rat.
Rat owes us royalties after this podcast,
Pretty much. But yeah,
or the whole rap industry. I don't know which.
so again, I don't know if it is chicken and egg. I don't know if the music is a true reflection of the morality currently, or if the music is what's changing the morality. That's up in the air.
And would you say all this discussion spans all genres? I mean,
Oh,
are we
most
talking,
definitely.
Are we talking about just rock, rap, hip hop,
No,
blues,
no, no. Pop music today.
country?
I think pop music today is one of the most vulgar and almost hideous versions of music to date. Even back when drugs, sex, and rock and roll was a thing, modern day pop music cannot be touched as far as the vulgarity that's being pushed out to not only young adults but children.
Well, let's pick somebody that spanned multiple genres. Elvis Presley. He had religious
He had gospel,
gospel music. He had
And
rock and roll.
the rockabilly, the country
He
mix.
was, he led that generation into the rock age, but he also, was in everybody's church pew. So, is it the artist? What is it? Is he just playing to all the different genres because he's opportunistic?
I think that's a good point too, because I think that hip hop artists, I think they're in it for the money. They're in it for the notoriety, and the more notoriety they get, the more money they think they can make out of it. If you go back to certain artists, and I can't think of any names right offhand, but there are certain artists that are actually in the business to create artistry in their music.
So we shouldn't judge an artist by the music they publish? Are we really just judging the people that are buying that work instead of the artist? Is the artist not culpable at all for what they're publishing?
Why do you answer questions with questions?
Why ask why?
Are you the moderator?
Nope.
Okay. In answer to your question, I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly don't know that one either.
Apparently there's no moderation on this podcast, by the way.
Yeah, so I really don't know on that one about the moderation or the questions.
Just things that make you go,
Yeah, it's quite an interesting thought though, but I mean, you had. Let's go back to the Beatles. I mean, if you look at the Beatles and what kind of cultural, how much.
Can you go back to the Beatles?
I love the Beatles.
Okay.
What kind of impact they had, but you're talking about they shifted
He
styles.
has a record player.
I grew up.
Anyone with a
on the
turntable
Beatles.
can go back to the Beatles.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I would say they shifted styles there for a while. It was the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely album where they shifted styles completely. They went to a more, I want to say, rocky sounding. Rather, it kind of went from the heartthrob. Would that be considered boy band back in that day? I really don't know how to describe the Beatles originally.
I think you'll find that if you dig deep enough, that you'll find that the people who were writing the songs changed.
True.
You'll-
Right. That is a good point. A lot of the artists who
The
became
front people were just entertainers.
right. Well, like with Queen, if you go to their like their credits and stuff, it was Freddie Mercury and the members of Queen. It was the band who were writing the songs. modern artists don't do that. Very few modern artists write their own songs.
Well, a lot of times you'll also say where one person is credited with the lyrics, and then the band is credited with the song itself because they come in and fill in the blanks with the musical notes.
Well, I know the focus is music on this one, but we're really getting into pop culture a bit too, right? So, I mean, I can think of examples too where the censorship has gone the other direction. Instead of loosening up, it's tightened up. Think about the sitcoms in the 70s. There was a lot of things on there that would be so controversial today that they're taking them off
You're
television.
talking about Sanford and Son?
Sanford and Son, Archie Bunker,
Archie, yeah.
All in the Family.
Yes, I know what they are, John.
I mean, the
know what they
Jeffersons.
are.
I understand. They play reruns.
So, so I'm just saying that, we started out this conversation talking about how censorship had loosened up. I think in some ways it's tightened up. It's really just a matter of it's adjusting to your current culture. My question to this podcast title is
I'm
that
not-
more or less morality?
I'm going to answer your question with a question. I'm not sure.
Touche.
I'm not sure that you're correct in assuming that because certain TV shows showed a lack of respect, like Archie Bunker. That show, most of those shows had a lesson to be learned.
Mm.
Archie wasn't the bigot that people made him out to be, because when pushed to the edge of his limits, he softened up, and a lot of what he did was better, for lack of a better term, an act, so that you could learn a morality lesson.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So the moral of the story.
But if you want to say,
So the ends justify the means.
Has censorship tightened down? No, censorship has not tightened down, because in the '60s, early '60s, a man and his wife couldn't even get in the same bed together.
Yeah.
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 I Love Lucy.
Now think of the things that are done in the bed.
So I'm on the I Love Lucy mark. There's something about, you're talking about the culture, that I would like to touch on. So you're saying that, back in the 60s, 70s, when I Love Lucy was prominent, they didn't sleep in the same bed. So a lot of modern music is saying that females are empowered because they're able to flaunt whatever they got. They have these very promiscuous and raunchy songs. But you have the story of Lucille Ball, who fought just to be able to say that she was pregnant. That was a big deal, and that was true power on her part. And that definitely was a culture flip. Sorry, I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but as far as how pop culture has affected morality, that was a huge deal back in the day. That was a fight for her, and that, honestly, I feel like has been completely tainted by modern day music and how women have kind of quote unquote empowered themselves in modern day music.
I'm still struggling with the chicken and egg. Did that change our culture, or does it keep adjusting to match our culture?
That's what I would say. It's changing to match our culture.
So what does that say about our culture then?
Oh.
Have we gained in morality or lost in morality?
Will you stop doing that? We're here to talk about things, not ask a bunch of questions.
All right, audience. So, audience members, you guys are now part of the podcast, because every question Johnny's asked, we need an answer for, because he's just going to keep asking them, and we're going to be running out of breath here soon. So, but to the point, it has is music changing to fit the culture? Oh yes, most definitely. And to answer your question, are we less moral now, or has morality changed for the worse now than it 20, 30 years ago? Most definitely.
Or are we just more transparent?
That's the key. There is communication. You can pull up any of these what we would consider immoral songs, immoral music videos. Anybody can pull them up at any time if they've got access to the internet. So if people are so deemed to pull those up and look at them, they're paying the artist to perform that way.
Yeah. Well.
So they're accepting whatever morality that artist is trying to put forth.
Well, there's one more. We have about 5 or so minutes left before we hit the 30-minute mark, and there's one thing that I would like to.
Is it 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
5 minutes. Anyways, there's one thing
And
that I
get dinged for asking questions.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, he's asking questions that are relevant to the recording itself, not to our existence as humans.
I'm on topic. I mean, come on.
But in when I was growing up, I was raised by my grandparents. I was raised with old country folk, very little classic
Hank
rock.
Williams, Charlie Pride.
So one of the common
I've heard
things
about those names.
Oh yeah. One of the things that I've noticed and the music that I was raised with versus the music now is the music back when my grandfather was young, they were always telling stories. And John said that there's usually a moral to the song. There's usually a lesson to be learned.
They were ballads.
Right. But that doesn't happen anymore. We don't get stories in music anymore. Very few artists, and it's typically country artists who really tell a story through a song. And I feel like
What does it take to make a country song? A dog, a truck,
An ex-wife,
an ex-wife,
So-
a girlfriend,
on that note, y'all should go
shotgun.
and
alcohol.
If he wants to sponsor me, I'm all for it. So there's this comedian named Bo Burnham. I love Bo Burnham. He has a lot of shock factor, but he is what I call a musical comedian. Very talented. And he did a gag one time on stage, was talking about what they call stadium country. And stadium country is exactly what you're talking about. It's a bunch of what he calls metrosexuals standing up, just saying words that they know that would get them famous. People who've never worked a day in their life talking about how hard it is to wear boots on walking down a dirt road or something. And it's definitely a good listen if you ever want to get a laugh out of it, because it's exactly what you're talking about.
And you can go
For the record, that comedian has not paid us to advertise for him.
No, but if he wants to, I'm all for it.
That injection into this podcast was just a reflection of Mikey's taste. That's all I'm saying.
It's not necessarily a good taste, but it's definitely an interesting conversation to have with that one song, because he did it with I think he did it with rap music before too, talking about some of the cliches that a lot of people just cling on to become famous.
So where do we go from here? What do we glean from today's episode?
I say, what's the lesson to be learned from all the questions that Johnny asked?
I forget what he was asking.
I don't know.
I remember
I get no respect.
I remember the chicken and the egg.
They're very pricey right now.
You do? Which came first?
Once again, I know the question. I didn't say I knew the answer.
Well, I think there's a few things that we can learn. I say learn. A few takeaways is that music has definitely influenced a lot of people because it has such a huge reach. But music is shaped by the morality of our culture, not the other way around. The other thing that I will say is rap and rat are two totally different things.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
That's a big difference. Big takeaway from
is rap
today.
with 2 P's or 1?
It depends on the person.
Okay.
Yeah, depends on the artist. You know.
Well, this was fun.
Yeah. One more note. You know, hip hop back in the day was completely different than what it is today. Hip hop back in the late '80s, early '90s was far different than what it is today, and it wasn't until mid '90s that the was it anarchical, F the police, that whole era.
You're talking about
around.
pre and post parachute pant days?
MC Hammer, or was that Sir Mix? That was MC Hammer. Yeah.
I don't know about John, but I had parachute pants. Just saying.
I'm sure.
I did not.
Bell bottoms.
No comment.
Well,
I may have wore bell bottoms on my honeymoon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
is
I
she
may still have them.
And she still went with you?
Huh?
And she still went with
She's
you?
still married to him.
That must have been some really nice bell bottoms.
No. Nope. Which brings us to a weird thing. I don't know if this belongs here or not, but my mother, we weren't from an affluent family by any stretch of the imagination. My mom provided most of the income for the house, so usually whatever she said or did went. And one of the things that she always did when she would go out and buy me clothes, it was off the hangers that nobody else would buy. And the reason that they looked like they did is because she said, well, that's what everybody else is wearing. So there's my morality right there.
Well, on that note, we've hit our 30-minute mark, so I think we're going to bring this episode to a close. Johnny, anything to add before we go?
No, I would like to hear some feedback from our audience, though. I'd like to know something about those questions and what they were, where they'd like for us to take the next episode.
I'm gonna pose a question, and I hope we get some feedback from John. You have anything before we close?
Nope, I'm good.
So the question I have for the audience is: we kept talking about how music has been changed because of the culture. I want you guys to think about the most influential or culturally changing or impactful song that you guys know, and put them in the comments of this podcast, and we'll talk about them on a future episode. But yeah, if that's it, we're gonna
pick out some from multiple genres. You know,
over
multiple generations.
multiple
Right?
generations, absolutely.
Yeah,
And it may lead to another podcast.
possibly. I hope so. Alrighty. Well, thank you for listening to Modern Morality. Thank you for listening to Modern Morality. Please visit our website at modernmoralitymedia.com and leave us some feedback about the show. We look forward to exploring more with you. Until next time.